دكتور رندا عندك co-hosting دلوقتي. اوكي. Hi everyone, we're going to start within 2-3 minutes just to make sure that everyone is here. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us, and we might just give another extra 2 minutes to make sure that everyone is here. At 6:05, we're going to start sharply, and thank you for joining us early. Okay, we shall start. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure having you here in our fifth webinar at our Spatial Analysis and Simulation Lab community. Actually, our community is very active, and I would like to introduce my team as well. With us, Dr. Randa Khalil and Mariam Magid with us, and Ahmed, and a lot of other participants. But right now, we are formatting this lab and community in order to serve the spatial analysis and simulation interests, or whoever is going to be interested at this point. As you can see, this is our website. We are doing things related to research and considering spatial analysis, simulation modeling, AI applications. We are doing webinars, and this is one of the webinars we have done previously, webinars on topics related to spatial analysis, topics related to community and architecture research. In addition, of course, we have today's webinar, and please, can I ask that everyone mute himself or herself, please? Thank you. And we have webinars, and today we have an interesting and lovely webinar, and I would like to thank Dr. Alia Fadel for joining us and accepting to be here with our community. It's really a pleasure having you here. And just a quick biography. She's a senior lecturer in landscape architecture, Leeds Beckett University, UK. And she's an educator and researcher, architect, and landscape architect, and a biophilic design consultant and ethnographic observation specialist. Dr. Fadel is a senior lecturer in landscape architecture at Leeds Beckett University, fellow of the UK Higher Education Academy, and the transversal editor for Journal of Landscape Architecture, European Council of Landscape Architecture Schools. Her area of expertise is biophilia and biophilic design and urbanism, with a scholarly focus on the interrelationship between design, health, and contact with nature to support health and wellness in the built environment. She received several prestigious awards, including Fulbright USA in 2007, 2018 PhD Best Dissertation Award from Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago, USA, and in 2019 ARCC Dissertation Award Honorable Mention from the Architecture Research Centers Consortium, USA. Dr. Fadel's experience in teaching, research, and practice extend for over 20 years in include notable international universities in Egypt, USA, and UK. And actually, she's a dear friend and colleague, and I'm so happy that she accepted to be here with us. Dr. Alia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nabil. Thank you. Thank you, Nabil, for the kind invitation and introduction. And thanks as well to all the attendees of today's webinar. I'm pleased to join you and contribute to the spatial analysis and simulation lab and community. So thank you for having me today. I will try to share my screen. Okay. So are we good? Is it sharing? Super. Okay. So thank you again, Nabil, and thank you to all of you for having me today. I think, well, thinking about the overall theme and the spatial analysis, I remember when Nabil and I had this chat previously, I wasn't sure how I would fit with all my theory and thinking in biophilia into this theme. So I hope it will bring you something different to the discussion. And I'm happy to be with you and share with you today. In this webinar, I'm happy to share with you my passion and some of my research in biophilia as a philosophy, theory, application, and most importantly, as a dynamic lens of green creative health. This is a huge topic, and due to the time and focus of today's webinar, I will only share with you some fundamental concepts just to open a tiny window into this fascinating interdisciplinary pool of knowledge for us to take a quick peek together. To share with you some background, as an architect and landscape architect, I deeply believe in the ethical responsibility to research, design, and teach for human health and wellness. My research focus is the interrelationship between design, health, and contact with nature for human physical, psychological, and emotional wellness, particularly in the built environment. But the challenge, well, and the pleasure, is how to look deeply into a subject like human health and wellness without obtaining a medical degree coming from architecture background, to look into it from the creative lens of a designer, a researcher, an architect, and landscape architect. I started my journey with biophilia and the biophilic design looking for answers to some critical yet quite basic questions, like the reasons behind our fascination about landscapes and plants. Why we feel a positive emotional boost when we smell a flower. Why we feel happier and less stressed after a short walk in a nearby park. Why our focus, productivity, and concentration are way higher when we just open a window, when sun rays filter into the room and we could feel a breeze of air. Well, and hopefully hear a singing bird nesting on a nearby canopy tree if we're so lucky. Why and how this is important to us as researchers, as designers, curators of places, designing for human and non-human subjects, flora and fauna. Well, after years, I found some answers, but still looking for many. Researching for answers and following my passion, biophilia theory is my first and most important thread. Biophilia was first defined in 1973 by Eric Fromm in an amazingly inclusive description as the passionate love of life and of all that is alive. It is the wish to further growth, whether in a person, a plant, an idea, or a social group. And this is one of my very favorite definitions of biophilia for its inclusivity, to include a wide range of biophilic interpretations that are capable of accommodating human agency, biodiversity, flora and fauna, cultural differences, and even philosophies and evolutionary arguments about human embodied connection with nature. And I personally find the use of the word passionate just brilliant. In 1984, Edward Wilson extended this theoretical thread and defined biophilia from interesting evolutionary perspective as the innate tendency to focus on life and lifelike processes, arguing that the brain appears to have kept its old capacities of the inherited appreciation, fascination, and even fear from different environmental qualities for their association with human early survival stages. And when human beings remove themselves from the natural environment, the biophilic learning rules are not replaced by modern versions because our innate biophilia evolved into environmental preferences and aesthetic pleasure. So, for instance, no matter to what extent we modernize our lives and structure our built environments, even if we live in the city, we prefer to have a view to a nearby park. We plant our sidewalks. We love and value blooming flowers and colorful butterflies. We grow indoor plants. We draw portraits of natural scenes. We wear clothes with and jewelry with floral patterns. All clear evidence of our embodiment of biophilia. To better understand biophilia, we need to look into its theoretical context. And therefore, let's look together into some key evolutionary-based theories that hopefully will give some insights into the origin of biophilia as a theory and philosophical thread, and how thousands of years of human evolution still subconsciously shape our environmental preferences and stimulate our restorative responses in modern days. From the early beginning of the human race, the deep essential association between Homo sapiens' existence and nature was fundamental. Nature, with both its delicate and harsh sides, was essential for human survival. In the most basic form, human being needed, well, and will always need, air to breathe, food to eat, and shelter to reside. For humanity, survival is not just existence. It is meaning, value, culture, experience, perception, even aesthetics and artistic qualities. Human response to different environmental qualities is anchored in two main pillars: the environmental multisensory stimulation evoked from our lived experiences in natural and built environments, and evolutionary basis of our enduring tendency to connect with nature, not only for aesthetic and ecological purposes, even though I believe they are extremely important, but also to simply survive, to breathe, to heal our exhausted physical, psychological, and emotional selves. Searching for the origin and going back years before the first use of the word biophilia, in 1949, Konrad Lorenz described the evolutionary basis of human interrelationship with nature as we reconnoiter, seeking before we leave our cover, to gain from it the advantage which it can offer alike to hunter and hunted, namely to see without being seen. Introducing the concept of see without being seen as a core survival strategy that evolved during the early stages of human existence and extended to influence our current spontaneous responses to different environmental qualities, including light, scale, landscape composition, visual openness, sense of enclosure, and sheltered protection. Human beings need to feel safe and protected, yet challenged and motivated to explore possibilities. For instance, this is the open landscape field in front of Mies van Dro's famous Crown Hall in Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. Crown Hall is an architecture masterpiece from the modernism era, built in the 1950s, and this was one of my PhD case studies. During my hours of ethnographic observation in consecutive seasonal cycles, I was able to capture and document a clear pattern of occupation here. People, students, collegiate and neighboring community prefer to sit, rest, eat, and read under the trees' dense canopies at the border line around the open grass field, while the heart of the open field itself was only impulsively occupied by occasional directed pattern of movement from one side to another across the open field. And this is a clear example of how human beings could approach modern urban landscapes by spontaneously applying the see without being seen survival strategy. And I would argue that distributing small clusters of canopy trees within this open field would definitely alter this pattern of occupation, not for better, not for worse, but for the expected behavior impact. And many studies in evolutionary psychology could explain to us why one wouldn't like to just sit in the middle of the field, feeling so exposed, vulnerable, and possibly being targeted even visually. Another important interdisciplinary theoretical threads were introduced by J. Appleton in 1975. The habitat selection theory and the prospect refuge theories. So to address the evolutionary basis behind our experience in the landscape and feelings of safety, threat, challenge, and opportunities in different environmental qualities, Appleton's habitat selection theory discusses how aesthetic pleasure in landscape drives from the observer experiencing the environment favorable to the satisfaction of their biological needs, and that the resulted satisfactory experience is translated into everlasting aesthetic pleasure and environmental preferences, even if, and this is quite interesting, even if it's not longer essential to the achievement of these biological needs, well, at least not in a direct way. So, for instance, this is the Leeds-Liverpool Canal in fall 2024, significantly popular route for walking, jogging, cycling in Crystal Valley in Leeds in the UK. And when we look into this designed landscape, we're not in desperate need for this environment to survive. We're not going to eat from its plants. We're not going to drink from its pond or canal water, or spend the night sleeping under this central tree. However, the appreciation toward this landscape in the heart of an urban context could be explained from evolutionary perspective, as it spontaneously stimulates our aesthetic pleasure because we subconsciously perceive it as a suitable habitat for survival. Or in our modern terms, a restorative opportunity where people could pause, refuge, and catch their breath in a safe, relaxing, and accessible landscape. And this is due to the diversity of plant materials, a non-threatening fauna. And this is also important because if you see a bear or a tiger hiding in the middle of those landscape features, your response would immediately be different. It wouldn't trigger your positive responses on biophilic restoration. You would be basically focusing on your survival. Big central and significant tree with wide branches forming possible shelter and symbolizes protection. Clear and reflective water feature, open blue sky, bright sunlight, and both visual openness and sense of enclosure, which all are important attributes of biophilia and the biophilic design. Now let's weave more threads into Appleton's second theory, the prospect and refuge. From an evolutionary perspective, prospect landscape is the preferable environment for hunting activity, where the natural settings provided the chance to see the prey, the opportunity, without being seen and exposed, well, and become a prey yourself. And refuge landscape is the preferable environment for relaxed and intimate activities, where the natural settings provided shelter to settle down and be protected from possible hazard. And according to Appleton, the mechanisms do not immediately die out in the species, but continue to be transmitted from one generation to another. As prospect symbolizes light, possibility, and opportunity, while refuge symbolizes shelter, protection, warmth, and enclosure, hazard symbolizes challenge, risk, and threat. And the interplay between prospect, refuge, and hazard has a significant impact not only on our current environmental preferences, but also in our continuous risk evaluation and environmental decision making in our modern context. Asking ourselves all the time, okay, does it worth it? Leaving my refuge, surviving the hazard to reach the faraway prospect? Quite a hard decision we always make subconsciously. Another important theoretical thread to biophilia and the human evolutionary responses to the landscape emerged since the 1982 by Stephen and Rachel Kaplan. They discussed how human being is a seeker of involvement, to the extent of becoming proficient at extracting information from the environment, where a scene or a landscape or setting is not merely something to perceive, but something to enter into. And this impressive cognitive capacity of human brain plays a significant role in shaping our environmental preferences in many emotional and neurological ways, basically creating a sense of knowing what to expect, as the Kaplans described. They can be positive or negative according to their association with earlier satisfactory or unsatisfactory environmental qualities. We wouldn't take the walk if what we could see from a far distance stimulated negative responses like fear, for instance. But we would take it excitedly because what we saw from a farther distance evoked our positive responses and curiosity. Thinking critically about biophilia and many other evolutionary-based theoretical threads helped answering some of my earlier questions, but again, and immediately led to other sets of questions. Why? Why contact with nature matters for human health and wellness? Why was it and is still fundamental for human survival from thousands of years and extending to our modern time? This is another opportunity for interdisciplinary critical thinking to weave more threads of knowledge from theory and science to find the answers for the new questions. Asking ourselves, is human innate biophilia only about what we like or dislike, our environmental preferences and evolutionary arguments? Actually, there is a rich context of interdisciplinary theoretical premises that hypothesize the restorative benefits and therapeutic outcomes from contact with nature for human survival, health, and wellness, including, but not limited to, biophilia. Well, since biophilia theory, the innate tendency to focus on life and life-like processes, the one that we started with, Ulrich psychoevolutionary theory, and how the existence of biophilic environmental qualities supported the survival of early humans by allowing for a breather from stress within minutes of the positive stimuli exposure. For instance, we talked at the beginning how nature has both its delicate and harsh sides. So experiencing a life-threatening storm or wildfire was stressful for early humans. However, they were able to recover from the trauma when experiencing non-threatening nature as soon as the risky circumstances came to an end. Ulrich positive disruption is another theory suggesting that when the environment includes, quote, an external pleasant distraction such as nature scene, people focus on their internal pain and stress reduces. Meantime, the capacity of human conscious attention gets restored. The Kaplan restoration theory and how nature is an effective restorative environment to alleviate the state of directed attention fatigue and help the recovery from mental exhaustion. Harting et al. Social ecology model of stress and restoration and how adaptation requires periodic restoration, which can be enhanced by nature-based interventions, particularly when integrated within pathways between settings, and many more thought-provoking threads of theoretical premises hypothesizing the restorative qualities of nature. Well, in addition to this rich theoretical context, from the late 1970s till now, a significant body of growing research introduces empirical findings and scientific evidence from medical and laboratory studies proving the therapeutic outcomes from contact with nature and mediums of nature stimulation for human physical, psychological, and emotional health and wellness. To synthesize, including mitigating stress and anxiety, alleviating attention fatigue and mental exhaustion, reducing feelings of physical and emotional pain, and decreasing violent behaviors, while boosting positive physical and emotional responses like feelings of satisfaction and pleasure, increasing interactive relationships, providing multisensory stimulation, nourishing neurological activities, enhancing productivity and ability of creative problem solving, and much more, leading us to realize the great importance of biophilic restoration, which I define to be a nature-based therapy. It's the process of recovering and reviving human physical, psychological, and emotional well-being due to their eternal embodied affinity to connect with nature and mediums of nature stimulation. I'm particularly arguing in my recent publication for interval biophilic restoration, which I define as the healing process of biophilic restoration when it happens at an accessible, intermediate, and temporal pattern that is integrated within people's daily cycles of activities. It is a dynamic ecotherapy process stimulated by healing moments of multisensory encounters with nature and mediums of nature stimulation at the micro, intermediate, and macro urban scale. But how? How can we achieve the physical, psychological, and emotional state of biophilic restoration? Well, how can you, as a landscape architect, or a designer of any sort, stimulate the therapeutic and healing outcome? This question brings us to biophilic design. In 2008, Stephen Killert defined biophilic design as the deliberate attempt to translate an understanding of the inherent human affinity to affiliate with natural systems and processes, known as biophilia, into the design of the built environment. It is basically the design interpretation of biophilia theory, the creative design interpretation of nature in landscape architecture, interior design, urban design, art, photography, fashion, music, dance, and much more, with the intention to achieve the restorative therapeutic benefits from contact with nature and mediums of nature stimulation. By the way, this image is from the inside of Miss Van Dro's iconic Crown Hall in Chicago, the one I showed you in previous slides. And the landscape silhouette that you see here is Alfred Caldwell's modernist landscape. And both Mies and Caldwell worked together in the theme of campus in the park. Quite interesting biophilic relevance from the modernist era. And this was part of my argument during my PhD research that biophilic moments are not exclusive to certain architectural styles. To me, a biophilic space is the spatio-temporal medium where the manifestation of human embodied connection with nature and mediums of nature stimulation takes place. It features the environmental stimuli and sensory incentives that have the ability to evoke human biophilic positive and restorative responses. A biophilic space is a nature or designed environment that allows, accommodates, and highlights the serendipitous moments of biophilic and restorative opportunities that a designer, a landscape architect, can expect, structure, and plan for, however, can never fully control. Because it's simply an organic segment of the bigger ecological system, and this unceasing dynamic is the magnificence of biophilia and biophilic design. Now to another question, where? Where to introduce biophilic design? Well, everywhere and anywhere, particularly where it's much needed in the harsh urban context. The urban negative stimuli are associated with environmental, financial, social, and personal factors. It's not possible for many of these negative stimuli to come to an end. They are rooted within the civilized mechanism humans are living up to in modern society. Although they can never be eliminated or avoided, their harmful effect on human physical, psychological, and emotional health can definitely be mitigated. When restorative opportunities from regular contact with nature and mediums of nature stimulation as well become available and accessible. This clearly highlights the potentials and the necessity to see urban landscapes as restorative environments, where biophilic landscape interventions create opportunities for the urban population to heal and restore. Biophilic landscape interventions in our cities provide much needed opportunities for co-restoration, restoration of the ecological mechanism, biodiversity and nature in general, and restoration of our exhausted physical, psychological, and emotional selves from all the challenges we're facing living and surviving our modern agencies. When it comes to biophilic design, city is not the opposite of nature. City is not the enemy. The urban reality is the challenge and the opportunity at the same time. It is a hazard and the prospect. But the question is, could it be the refuge too? Well, since over half the world's population currently lives in cities, and 70% of the world's population is expected to live in cities by 2050, according to the World Health Organization, there must be many special attributes, opportunities about our cities to attract this much population, right? If our cities are here to stay, which I believe they should because cities are not disposable, biophilic design embodies high potentials to transform our urban, harsh, stressful reality into a city that is alive. City that integrates urban landscapes to support biodiversity and human health and well-being. A biophilic city. In 2011, Timothy Bentley defined a biophilic city as a biophilic city is at its heart a biodiverse city, a city full of nature, a place where in the normal course of work and play and life, residents feel, see, and experience rich nature, plants, trees, and animals. The nature is both large and small, from treetop lesions, invertebrates, and even microorganisms, to larger natural features and ecosystems that define a city and give it its character and feel. A biophilic city sounds like a great aim, but the challenge is how to approach biophilic city as an empowering philosophical theme and design strategy rather than falling into another fantasy urban utopia. The history of urban design and city planning includes a wide range of utopian attempts to create a greener, healthier, and happier city, including but definitely not limited to Vitruvius' Ideal City, Howard's Garden City, Le Corbusier Ville Radieuse, Frank Lloyd Wright Broadacre City movements like landscape urbanism, cities alive, green and blue infrastructure, biophilic cities. That's why I tend to see the value of biophilic moments in the city. Maybe someday we can reach the state of a biophilic city, but as a starting point, I think we need to acknowledge the harsh urban reality, appreciate the opportunities, and feel empowered to create biophilic interventions at whatever possible and accessible scale. Biophilic moments create healthier cities, whether labeled as biophilic cities or no. Biophilic moments in the city create deep and powerful connections to nature. It brings the wonder, value, and sense of mystery and pleasure. Biophilic moments positively impact health and wellness, cognitive and intellectual skills, academic performance, and ability of problem solving, while integrating much needed nature-based solutions to improve ecology and urban biodiversity. Last but not least, biophilic moments in the city bring serendipity, happiness, pleasure, satisfaction, and higher quality of life, particularly if they are weaved within people's cycles of activities. And as we approach the end of my presentation, I would like to invite you all to think about your own biophilic moment, own environmental experience when your contact with nature made you feel better, physically, psychologically, emotionally, or intellectually. It can vary from a couple days of camping in the woods or a trip to the beach to a short walk through a green streetscape in your busy trip from the bus stop to the university to a lunch break in a nearby urban pocket park to an open window to get some sun and breeze of air during the lockdown, to a moment when you heard a singing bird or smiled seeing a silly running squirrel. It can even be a decision to care for a pet or an indoor plant, draw a portrait of nature scenery to pin at your living room wall, or even enjoy your afternoon tea at the balcony or just staring from your window. Think about this precious moment, precious encounter with nature or mediums of nature simulation. Why this personal environmental experience with the landscape was and probably is still important to you. What do you remember the most from this environmental experience? A smell, a sound, a color, a taste, a touch, a feeling, or even a combination of all? How this multisensory environmental experience influenced you in a positive way. Try to relive the experience in few minutes. Revisit your own biophilic moment. When your contact with nature made you feel better, physically, psychologically, emotionally, or intellectually. I invite you to be an active participant in the research and design process. We research and design for people. Well, and guess what? We are people too. We learned today that contact with nature is important for human health and well-being. And guess what? We are humans too. To research and design a biophilic restorative environment, I believe we first need to acknowledge our own human responses and lived experiences to better understand ourselves as researchers and designers, and hopefully as curators of healing spaces and experiences. I invite you all to think and reflect on your own biophilic moment. And if you wish, maybe you share with us in the discussion time, or you can email me your reflection. I'm always happy to receive this. And finally, I would like to end my presentation today by sharing with you an exceptional quote that always inspires me. This quote by Frederick Law Olmsted, the father of American landscape architecture, from his 1852 wonderful book, Walks and Talks of an American Farmer in England, describing the softness, richness, and mystery of the healing process that occur due to contact with nature. We know not exactly when or how, but going away, we remember it with tender, subdued, and filial-like joy. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Alia Fadel. It's really
Thank you,
interesting.
Nabil.
It's really interesting and relaxing and nice and valuable. I can't express my feelings really.
Oh my God, thank you.
You have used lovely photos, and the photo, each one of them give really, I mean, the sense of relaxation, yet anxious and waiting for the next photo. Really, really, thank you very much for sharing this
Thank you.
presentation with us. I've, each slide is really interesting, and I have a ton of questions, and let's regulate the questions issue. So I'll take the benefit of hosting this part to start the first question. While please others kindly write your question on the chat box, and if you wish, you can say it. I mean, after the first question, and then of course, Alia, if you do have the time, just respond to them.
I'll do my best.
Thank you. Let's start with your first issue about what's the difference between biophilic design and what we are doing here in the spatial simulating or simulation analysis. Actually, it's all about the same issue, and
Yes.
really it's interrelated, because if space could be understood, how people behave in that space, their experience, their emotions could be captured in a way, in a quantitative way, because if we can capture it in a quantitative way, then we can replicate it or even forecast how others might use that space and their feelings. So we're doing the same issue, but we're doing from the other way around.
Agree.
So my first question, what if we're replacing all these greenery with desert or desert architecture? Do you think people might feel the same? Is it the same responses that we might gain from them? Or only the greenery is just what really attracts us and all the related ecosystem and the environmental and all whatever is within that system? What do you think? Because why I'm asking this question, because in Egypt or I mean related countries, most of it, I mean, greenery might be challenging, and I don't know why our cities can't right now they are removing greenery. I don't know, maybe for economical issue, maybe because of the water. It's not that much enough. So what if we're using the current natural landscape, how people might interact with it?
Oh, well, those are lots of questions, Nabi.
I'm sorry.
No, but all very good. So I will do my best. So
Yeah.
first, yes, with the first point you brought about this idea of biophilic qualitative analysis, and it's relevant to the spatial quantitative analysis. Yes, I agree with you. There is, I think both are research methods and different approaches to try to understand the human behaviors in the space and how the environment, whether natural or built, is affecting human behaviors, and therefore we're able to become better designers and understand more and hopefully have an impact on those behaviors in a positive way. So yes, I agree with you. There's a lot of similarities, and these basically different tools, different research methods, and bringing different perspectives to the same challenge for us as researchers and designers. Regarding the desert question, which is really interesting, yeah, yes, I agree with this point as well, because it's about it's really inclusive in the sense of it, because biophilia is very much about our response to nature, and nature doesn't have to come in a specific conventional way. Like, nature has its very wide definition and its ecological representation across the globe. So, for example, if you look at the desert or the aquatic life under the sea, or if you look at, for example, at Sinai with all this magnificent um, ecological system that's already happening with the desert, with the amazing mountains next to the sea, with all the ecological diversity that's happening under the water, and the variation of and the contrast at the same time. You also in a quite extreme, if you think about areas of the world that's very much covered in snow most of the year. So I think definitely there is a wide interpretation of biophilia as a theory to accommodate this inclusive meaning of nature. Nature in humanity, nature in plants in general, whether it's xeriscape or tropical or aquatic or whatever type of plants. I think there is always a way of interpretation when it comes to evolutionary psychology, when it comes to our human response to the environment, whether natural with its inclusive way or built as well. I think with the third question about the green in the cities, yeah, this is, I think, quite a big question, very ununderstood, and especially because if we think from climate change perspective, you're making cities way hotter and and this will definitely impact with the urban heat island effect, and therefore it will reflect in economy, and everyone is turning air conditioned. So it is really a horrible cycle. But at the same time, especially in our in countries like Egypt and desert countries, you need the plants even more, not only to reduce the heat, but also to filter the particles from the air, and to provide shade, provide much needed shade, and also provide those amazing opportunities for people to all the points that we were talking about, get the feelings of the prospect and refuge and sense of pleasure and the quality of life and the sense of excitement that happens when you're in contact with nature.
So there is a beauty in any ecosystem or
Yes.
landscaping, whether it's desert one or whatever the space is. This is really very interesting, and I can see Randa is raising her hand. Please, Randa, if you'd like to address the second
Thank you
question.
so much, Dr. Alia, for your interesting presentation. Actually, it was very, very interesting and very inspiring. And I started feeling sad for ourselves, maybe in Egypt, when I saw your photos. Very, very inspiring. Then I came to a question: how can policymakers and urban designers collaborate to incorporate biophilic landscape into public health strategies, particularly in urban settings, and specifically in Egypt, Cairo, maybe?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question, Randa. Well, I think when it comes to the photos, I think part of what I'm talking about is green creative health. So the interpretation of nature, and part of what I'm doing as a researcher is nature photography, and that's why probably because there is like this big pool of research that argues for the healing potentials and impact that you got from even watching photos of nature. Because that's how your brain works, and the neurological reaction that happens in the process simulate as if you're walking in those environments. But I promise next time I will have some photos from Egypt. I have many beautiful photos from the desert in Egypt and from
Cairo.
under the sea, from in many lovely seasides in Egypt. So good point. Next time I will bring more from Egypt. When it comes to integrating biophilic attributes, I think it's very much relevant to this idea of understanding the different scales. And it doesn't have to be labeled as a biophilic city, as I said. With every simple, small intervention where you're bringing nature into people's daily cycles of activities, you're already adding something. You're targeting their mental health, you're targeting their physical and emotional health, and even their productivity, their sense of pleasure, and all of this. And these are not dreamy, poetic ideas. They are proven scientifically, and there are many, many research studies. I only shared just the surface, very brief synthesis of them, but it's just not a hypothesis anymore. It's been proven scientifically that with all those tiny interventions, you're able to create a difference. And this difference is not a luxury. It's not something you say, okay, it can't happen in Egypt, or it can't happen in certain financial circumstances. That's not the case at all. This is where it's actually more needed. And this brings a lot of focus on the importance of environmental justice and fair access to urban landscapes, which is something I'm very much interested in, particularly when it comes to inclusion. And this is, by the way, unfortunate reality across the world. So for less privileged communities and less privileged neighborhoods, even here in the UK, you see higher higher correlation between the less privileged communities and the levels of deprivation, financial deprivation, but also green deprivation. So less green spaces, because it's automatically perceived as a luxury, but this is not the reality of it. It's where it's much needed. And therefore, you found, for example, higher level of physical and psychological challenges happen in those communities for the lack of the green spaces and for all the social, cultural, economic deprivation that they already suffer from. So I believe in this case that environmental justice and inclusion when it comes to this fair distribution to green landscapes, particularly where it's targeted for deprived communities, is an ethical responsibility.
Thank you so much. I agree with you. We hope for better. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
yes, but yes, you have the tools. You have, with every single tiny intervention, it doesn't have to be super expensive or fancy. With every tiny bit, there is a hope.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for
the good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Randa. And I can see that we have Dr. Nihal El Sabah. If you would like to share your question, and then I think we have within the questions a Q&A. There are 2 questions, so we're going to address them after Dr. Nihal. Dr. Nihal, please.
Thank you, Dr. Alia, very much for the very interesting, insightful presentation. And
Thank you.
I think anyone who even doesn't work with biophilic designs appreciate nature very much as architects. So I would articulate my question from the multiple spaces that you might have analyzed and went through. How would you summarize the outputs that makes this space differ compared from one to another space? So what I want from the question is to try to materialize the intangible things that connects with the human aspect, so to enable us to design these spaces better instead of trial and error. And that brings the point to what Dr. Nabil has mentioned. Maybe now nature and green spaces sometimes puts other pressure on the environment, such as water scarcity and other challenges that we might face. So in order to kind of be able to assess these spaces in terms of their impact on humans, how would we kind of summarize these points or measure them instead of being qualitative into quantitative?
Thank you very much, Dr. Nihal, for your question. I think this is definitely an ongoing debate in the biophilic communities currently, because there are many approaches. As I said at the beginning when I was addressing Nabil's question, there are the qualitative, there are the quantitative, and there are like the mixed methods. But I think when it comes to biophilia in particular, and this is only my own opinion, we have to be extra careful not to turn it into a checklist, because it's a highly risky thing that we saw that it didn't help when it comes to sustainability. It didn't help with the regulations and list of specifications and things like this. I'm always concerned when I see like a list of the 28 biophilic attributes that has to happen in the space to call it a biophilic. So I always feel like, oh no, my God. And I know that there is a value from them, because particularly when you're trying to teach students to use the right terminologies and things like this, because biophilic terminologies are quite hard and coming from different disciplines, so it could be challenging for students and for communication. So in this case, I think this is useful, but trying to materialize what's inherently unmaterialistic is something sometimes could happen, but it just need to be addressed in a very careful and sensitive way, so we wouldn't focus on the biophilic design and lose the biophilia. And this would always be my worry when it comes to it. However, there are definitely methods to measure those attributes, but I would say it's definitely has to start with pilot studies, with case-by-case situation, and with a mix between qualitative and quantitative methods, or again, we might risk turning it into something tangible, highly tangible, or use tangible methods to measure non-tangible qualities, which could be slightly risky.
Thank you very much. I think it's the beauty of nature. So extracting whatever is natural there, the complexity of it is quite simple. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And it is very much an ongoing debate. And yeah, I would encourage you to hear from other people than me that works in the biophilic practice as well, because some people would see that the way, like, those materialistic points are really helpful when it comes to communicating with practice outside the academic and the theoretical context. So I definitely see value in both, but probably because I'm coming from theory, history, and criticism background, I'm slightly careful with those aspects of it.
Thank you,
But thank
Dr.
you.
Nihal.
Very good question. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a question from Asel Mustafa, if you'd like to address it, and I might answer the first few words of them, but if you'd like to address it, please go ahead. Asel Mustafa, are you with us?
Hey,
Yes.
Asir. Yes.
Hello. Hello, Dr. Alia.
Hello.
Well, I guess, hello, Dr. Nabil. Hello, everyone.
It's a pleasure meeting you.
Yes, for me too. Well, why do current research trends lean more heavily towards computational and simulation-based studies in sustainability and environmental fields, while mostly neglecting, the human experience and humanities? Furthermore, how can we integrate biophilic design approaches within these emerging trends? Would you think that virtual biophilic environments could be a viable solution, or are there other strategies that you would recommend?
Very good questions.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Asir. Alia,
Asir.
can I answer the first part of the
Yes,
question, if I may?
definitely.
Well, maybe because our lab and community actually is dealing with simulation and in particular
Yeah.
special configuration. However, we are open. That's why Alia Fadel is with us today, because we're trying to understand all the quantitative, qualitative issues and how to link both parts or both parties, because we cannot rely only on quantitative, because
Right.
it's so difficult to measure human emotions and experience, especially if they feel happy or sad. How could you measure this? Or excited, or all of these? We can measure it in a way, but it's not definitely accurate 100%. That's why we need to rely on different approaches. I'm sorry for interfering for the first part, just
No,
like
not
this.
at all.
And I
I
leave
think,
the heavy to extra parts of the question for you, Alia.
well, I will just add a point after your really good answer to this, Nabil, is that, again, these are research methods, and the best research that combines both. So, for example, I would see, even from my own perspective, with heavily in human-centered analysis, but I see great value from seeing behavior simulation and computational analysis of people behaviors in the space. And this, in addition to a layer of biophilic analysis, could add exceptional insights into understanding the place and how it could be developed. So I think maybe you brought really interesting, with your question, an interesting thread of research that we can investigate with this idea of using the computational simulation in addition to more of like the qualitative methods and how things can help us better understand, because it's never either or. I don't see it. I think when in a certain stage when I started working with biophilia, I might felt this way. It's either or, but as much as I knew about it and reflect on my own research, I think, no, it's always, it's very inclusive, I would say. Very inclusive research topic and very inclusive research methods of investigation as well. Regarding your question about whether a virtual biophilic design is useful, yes, I think definitely it is a useful method of investigation. But we have always to understand that our experience in the environment is very much multi-sensory. So the health benefits that you get from engaging all your senses in this process is higher. But at the same time, virtual biophilic qualities are very useful. For example, if you think about patients who cannot go for a walk and bringing nature to them virtually in hospital beds, that's definitely very, very useful. So again, it's never either or. And as I said, it's always this importance of being of nature, the actual nature, the ecological, living, biological nature, but also the creative interpretation of nature, which is including relevance to your question, is the virtual qualities of it.
Thank you very much, Esther. And Mariam, sorry, you've raised your hand earlier. So if you'd like to address your question right now.
So yeah, I was asking about what are the challenges we may find when we need to take into consideration designing with biophilic design principles. Things like infrastructure, materiality, maintenance, things like that.
Very good question, Mariam. Thank you. Yes, you're taking us back to the practicality and application of it. Yeah, I agree with you. There are many challenges, and that's why those. But those challenges, if you think about them, they are part of your role as an architect or a landscape architect or designer in any sort. You need to look into it, and I think it is also very relevant to the context that you're studying and you're integrating your biophilic qualities within it. So it's an opportunity, I guess, to think about more of nature-based solution and think about how biophilic attributes can help you think greener, think more creatively about things that can become mechanical or overly technical. But for example, from choice of materials, what kind of materials you will use, whether like plant materials, what are the plants that you're integrating in your design, and whether they are native, whether they will survive in this environment, whether they will need lots of water or they will be sensitive to the situation. Also thinking about the environmental conditions, the ecological quality that you have for plant materials that you're selecting, but also for the hardscape materials that you're using. Like, what are the construction materials? Are you importing materials from a very far away, and then you're bringing something that's very much not environmentally or ecologically fit with the context that you're designing, or you're being very sensitive of using local materials, selecting materials that has textures and has environmental qualities, rather than just relying all the time on dead concrete. How about you bring stones? You bring more of like an environmentally sensitive material. And this doesn't contradict, like, this is not a call for vernacular back again. There are many amazing high-tech buildings that are high biophilic buildings as well. So there is no contradiction between having a sound, strong, sustainable, high-tech skyscraper building, and we can learn a lot of lessons from Singapore, and at the same time, highly biophilic, highly environmentally friendly, and highly naturalistic in its core, because there is a big difference between actual green and greenwashing, which we see a lot. Greenwashing is basically camouflaging, pretending that we're green. But the real green, the core green that will actually impact your health and your health in the sense of like your health as a user and human being, but also that your health as a part of the ecological system, bringing more flora and fauna into your buildings, and your built environment and cities, is the green that we're hoping for.
Thank you very much, Maria, for the question. And I think ASUS, I don't know if this is the name, he or she's stating or would like to share or asking you for sharing your email or at least for a connection for research that he or she has done. So I
Yeah,
think they can
yeah,
approach you through LinkedIn, right?
yeah, they can definitely. You can message me on LinkedIn, or this my email in the slides now. So yeah, no problem.
That's great. Can I ask the last question, or if there are
Yes,
other?
sure.
Yeah, I'm happy that you are with us. I don't want to end.
Thank you, Nabil. I'm enjoying the discussion as well very much.
Thank you.
And bring me back home. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So this is a typical question I'm always asking all our guests. It's about how our postgraduate students effectively involve or incorporate the biophilic design principles into their research methodologies, or even senior projects like the graduation projects or something, because as you were saying, sometimes it's been included as a camouflage, or it's not realistic input. It's just, it's there in a way. So how they do this? And from your point of view, what are the common challenges that they might face into the biophilic concepts, and how they might overcome them? Because I know that you have dealt with postgraduate students a lot, and you have seen all of these challenges. So from your point of view, how they can implement them, the concepts of biophilic, and either in the research or senior project designs.
Yeah, that's very, very good question, Nabil. Yeah, so I agree with you for dissertation modules and for senior students, they're like senior students, undergrad or postgrad, and even at PhD level. Looking deep into biophilia and the biophilic design is a challenge. And I acknowledge this very much, and I feel for them. Feel for them. I want more people to study biophilia and biophilic design, but again, I feel for you. It's not easy. But my main advice is to always think interdisciplinary. Don't limit yourself, because you're an architect and you're or in my case also a landscape architect, but the idea that as an architect, you need to be open on humanities. You need to be open in other fields that are relevant. You need to bring understanding from science, because you're not, for example, with many of the resources that are used for this presentation are not labeled as being architects or landscape architects. And definitely many of them wouldn't even call themselves biophilic anything. So the idea that you as a researcher need to find your own threads, need to understand what are the interdisciplinary aspects that I need to help me better understand myself as an architect. Not that I will switch, which is something I thought about at some point, thinking, okay, do I need to take a medical degree, or what do I need to do? But actually you don't. But at the same time, you don't want to be superficial. You don't want to just call it a biophilic design thing because it sounds fancier than calling it a sustainable whatever. So it's not like this at all. If you're going to call it biophilic or biophilia, we're going to bring this thread, you have to dig deep. You have to do strong literature review. You need to understand the three main factors: the theory, the science, which is mostly medical, and from medical and social sciences, and the application. But jumping to the application without understanding what does it mean when you talk about jumping to the application directly, you're risking as if you're reading the conclusion chapter of a book before you go through the book. So you don't learn from the process, you just jump to the final result. But at the same time, you as an architect, you're not at a position to go and measure people blood pressure, for example, to prove that it's got affected by contact with nature. That's not your job, and you're ethically not allowed to do it. But at the same time, you are much encouraged to look into medical research and find literature review that will support this assumption. So interdisciplinarity, avoiding being superficial, dig deep, and originality. Originality is a key point as well. So you're not just ending with a literature review. You need to bring something new. And that's why I'm talking about the creative interpretation of biophilia. And this is something tricky, something hard, and I find it challenging at the postgrad level and even at the PhD level. But it's an essential. You need to bring something original to the table for any reason at any research you're doing, or it will just be a literature review and without new contribution to the field of architecture. So I think these will be mainly my advices. Avoid superficiality, dig deep to do this, look interdisciplinary, and finally make sure you're introducing and providing something original.
Thank you very much. And I
Thank
think
you,
we do have a
Nabil.
last question if you're still
Yes.
with us.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, Dina Khater, Dr. Dina, if you'd like to address your question briefly, if you please.
Yes, good evening. I really appreciated your presentation and much more your way to introduce the content. My question is there a specific methodology or previous researches regarding the way to upgrade existing communities based on biophilic design? And here I'm speaking specifically on the high density areas.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zina. That's a very good question because it's really important to think about methodologies that would fit based on the context. And the context you mentioned is high density, and high density is really one of the contexts. It's similar to deprived communities. It's where you actually need it, where it will play a lot, like a huge role, because with high density, you have great potentials of workability, of mixed use, of all the core aspects that we would hope for green city or green neighborhood to be. So I agree with you. This is an excellent context for biophilic interventions to happen. When it comes to methodologies, yes, there are many research studies that covers contexts like these, but I'm not sure if this is the proper context to mention particular materials, so it wouldn't be like advertisement or anything like this. But definitely there are, like with simple research, I'm sure you will find a lot of examples, whether in more of like the less privileged communities, neighborhoods, or whether in high density cities in general, that talks about biophilic interventions and its role in mitigating challenges with social interaction and problems that like for example, like bringing community together with simple interventions, and how it mitigates tension within the communities that could suffer in high density areas.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Dina. Thank you, everyone. And on behalf of the Spatial Analysis and Simulation Lab community, we would like to thank Dr. Alia Fadel for her contribution and joining us today, and her lovely presentation, valuable presentation and discussion. It's really a privilege having you here with us. And I cannot thank you more. It's really,
Thank you.
really
Thank you
happy
very
that you are
much,
with us.
Nabil. Thank you.
And
I really enjoyed the discussion with you and the attendee. All of them brought a lot of life to the session, and that's all brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you. And I would like to thank my team, Dr. Randa Khalil and Mariam and Ahmed and all the other team. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. And if you're going to give us your acceptance, we're going to publish this on our website as
Yeah,
a
that's
video
okay.
and
Yeah,
a summary
yeah.
of it.
Mhm.
And thank you, and wishing all the participants and you a lovely evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. Bye
You
bye.
too. Bye. See you all.